On behalf of the Islamic Alliance for Justice, thank you all for coming. IJ is a social justice organization devoted to raising awareness about issues that affect Muslims in the United States and across the world. We actually have a G-Body meeting next Tuesday, March 3rd at 5 to 6 in this building, room 156. So if you're interested, if you don't remember, you can ask. We welcome you to this event and would like to thank our co-sponsors for making it possible. These include the following Cornell departments: the Department of Development Sociology, Department of Government, the Judith Rafia Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, and the following student groups: the Cornell Progressive, the Arab Students Association, the Pakistani Student Association, and the Asian Pacific Americans for Action. We would also like to thank Amnesty International Local Group 73 in India. So we hope this panel will shed light on the practice of U.S.-operated unmanned aerial attacks in countries such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen. And there's many more. Ostensibly, drones primarily target high-risk individuals who pose a threat to the United States. But how effective are they really? Our speakers will contextualize drone attacks within the larger U.S. foreign policy, and will also talk about local anti-drone activism. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Rafia Zakaria is an author, attorney, and political philosopher whose work focuses on Muslim women, feminism, and the interactions of faith, justice, and legal systems. She is a regular columnist for the Al Jazeera America and Dawn Pakistan, having also written for publications like the New York Times, the New Republic, Dissent, and Guernica. Please.
Hello, everybody. Well, I'm coming to speak to you on a pretty good day for Amnesty International. We released our annual report today, and one of our big demands to the UN was to demand that the powers that have veto powers in the Security Council should give those up in crisis situations, so that issues, for example, like drone attacks and intervention, can be talked about, by more people than the members of the Security Council. So before I even start, I wanted to give a shout out to both our local Amnesty chapter, whose representatives are here today. So I think they, both with the Islamic Alliance for Justice and the other student organizations, they would welcome collaborations with you on issues like this, on bringing speakers, on just having discussions. So please, feel free to talk to them. They're here to give you information about our organization, to know more about how to do activism on these issues. My presentation today is actually a combination of the work Amnesty has done and my own research as a political scientist on the issue of drones and as a lawyer. I do international human rights law. One of the challenges that I've faced in advocacy related to drones as we've gone along is that A, people don't know what the legal complications of drones are. B, there's a very sort of inaccurate equation that puts the brutality of terrorism on one side and then presents tactics like drones as the answer. And that is sort of the political equation that's generally fed, not just to the American public, but also to public around the Muslim world, is that, terror is horrible, and this is going to be a magic solution for it. So what we're going to see then today is my effort to deconstruct that equation, and it's particularly crucial at this time. And I'll tell you why. Just before I came to this event, I was watching CNN, and all the headlines on CNN about ISIS and the war on ISIS, which of course represents a continuation of the war on terror, now to a different territory. So we're set, the Reauthorization of Military Force Act is in Congress. We're basically set to ratify another war and another intervention. And so of course, in the whole discussion about ISIS, the question has been kind of very cleverly turned onto issues like, well, is ISIS Islamic? Are Muslims responsible for this? Instead of the larger question that affects Muslims and everybody else, which is the question of whether we've been successful in the war on terror so far. And so while some of the material you're going to see today is about drones and like the definitions that are being used, the other part that you're going to see is essentially statistics that show and really question whether drones, even being illegal, have actually been effective in accomplishing the objectives of the war on terror as the Obama administration defines them, which is essentially an elimination of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So ultimately, that's the question I want you to keep in mind is, can we even, on one hand, we've got advocacy centered on the illegality of drone attacks, on the fact that they're unilateral action, on the fact that international law, and as well the UN as well as Amnesty has said that they're illegal. But then the other side of it is also that they really just don't work. And no one is willing to talk about that. And I think that it's crucial that we do, because they're going to be used again against ISIS and against this, what is now essentially a perpetual war on terror. I start always with this because there are so many misperceptions between Pakistanis and Americans. And for those of you who are Pakistani, you might have seen these cartoons. They were published in Dawn, which is the newspaper I write for, where, Americans say, oh wow, and they also seem to think that everyone in Pakistan speaks Arabic. And then on the other hand, Pakistanis seem to have similar misconceptions. And so talking about this essentially always involves getting over these misconceptions, right? I always put up a map of Pakistan because I don't think, most Americans are not aware of the fact that Pakistan, A, where Pakistan is, B, that Pakistan is currently surrounded by what are strategic hotbeds in the global economy as well as in global conflict. So we've got Afghanistan and the NATO presence on our western border. We've got India on our eastern border. We've got China, which is also an emerging superpower up north. And the different colors in a very rough way represent the ethnic diversity of Pakistan. And the reason why this is important is because one of the cumulative effects of drone attacks, other than the loss of life and other than the immediate casualties, has been mass displacement. And that mass displacement has essentially precipitated civil war in Pakistan. And I don't think it's possible to really understand just how dangerous drones are until you really internalize that fact. Is that you had a country where, the geographical areas were definitely demarcated by ethnic identity, different linguistic identity, and then you started bombing one part of that country, and the rhetoric that was used, I'll put it up, is it precise, precision, just the best sort of thing that we've got. Here, I'm going to skip that. The speech given in 2011, John Brennan claimed there hadn't been a single collateral damage death since 2010. This, of course, has been shown not to be true. And the reason why they can say that is because of this. It's because the definition of a target is essentially everyone within a strike zone is a combatant. Which means that it doesn't matter who the drone kills, but if you're within a strike zone of a drone, you're considered a combatant. And this is the Obama administration's own and currently applicable definition. So like I said, the human rights and investigative responses have focused on transparency, the fact that we have really no idea, no accurate idea of the amount of casualties that are happening from drone attacks. They focused on access. When Amnesty International actually has a great report on drones. It's called Will I Be Next? If you just put Will I Be Next and Amnesty International into Google, you can access it. And for that report, we did do on-the-ground research in Pakistan and came up with cases of civilian casualties. The biggest case that we highlight is of a grandmother who was literally in her vegetable garden picking vegetables, and she and a number of her family members were killed by a drone attack. We have another case, and those cases are from October 2014, well, not 2014, October 2012. And, so please do look at that. Like I said, the part that the human rights responses right now are not talking about is that the concept that's being sold is that drone strikes are a solution to terrorism. And this then is like the basis of what I'm going to try to show you, is that if drone strikes are a solution to terrorism, we would expect that the capacity of terror groups to commit attacks would be reduced after now, almost 350 drone strikes that have happened since 2009, since the Obama administration. So what we're going to do now is to look essentially at the number of drone strikes, the number that we have of the casualties, and then the number of terror attacks in Pakistan over the years, right? And the terrorist attack data is from South Asia Terrorism Portal. It's publicly available if anyone wants to look at it. And we're also going to look at the geographical area where these terror attacks happen. So in 2009, President Obama ordered 53 drone strikes. And as happened, this is still the case, every time there's a drone strike, there's immediately a claim of a Taliban leader or an Al-Qaeda leader that was killed. Of course, these claims have now been happening for years and years and years. Some Taliban leaders have actually been killed repeatedly because, we'll see one of those, because that's essentially, the way drone strikes are justified. So in this year, which was Obama's first year in office, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, for those who are not familiar with the geographical area, is the northwest of Pakistan, part right up in the north, immediately bordering Afghanistan. So in 2009, 80%, there were 500 terrorist attacks in Pakistan, and 80% of those attacks were in that northwestern area where the Taliban were concentrated. And the claim was that one of their leaders, including Baitullah Masood, was killed in that attack. In 2010, as you can see, the number almost doubled. It gets more than double. Obama ordered 128 strikes. And these estimates are, again, because we've got so much different data from so many different sources. Again, the deaths of various Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders were touted as successes. Number of terrorist attacks in this year were 473. Again, they were concentrated in that same region. So you can see that they've doubled the drone strikes, but the number of terrorist attacks actually stayed relatively the same. Then, in 2011, President Obama ordered 75 CIA drone strikes. And you can see that the ratio here of strikes to casualties increases because 2011 was also the year of the Osama bin Laden raid. And following that raid and following something that happened afterwards, the US was not able to get ground intelligence as easily. And so the drone strikes changed from strikes that were based primarily on intelligence from the ground to what's called signature strikes. And signature strikes are essentially strikes that look for a pattern of activity. So they might not have intelligence on exactly who they're targeting, They're just looking at how people are gathering, groups of people, and that of course has increased the casualty ratio, because if you're not sure, this is when a lot of the problems started to, at least the ones that we know of, started to happen, in that there were wedding parties or a group of laborers who were working on some building project, which in the drone operator's view look at like a pattern of activity that's suspicious. Now, even with the doubling of the strikes, you'll see that number of terrorist attacks in Pakistan becomes the highest in 3 years, it's 673, and the area of bombing increases from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa to Quetta and Karachi. And the reason why this is important is because essentially now, in the 3rd year of escalated drone warfare, you've got a war that was concentrated in one area, right? Largely the conflict was concentrated in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the northwest of Pakistan, in that northwest region next to Afghanistan. Now it's moved to cities of Quetta and Karachi. Karachi is the biggest city in Pakistan, 19 million people. And that is, essentially what you saw in this year. And then finally, in 2012, and here I've explained the strike pattern again. Again, the strike to casualty ratio increased even more. Again, there were claims that Tehreek-e-Taliban commander Hakimullah Masood was killed. Strikes also killed Al-Qaeda leaders, Qaid Fayaz, Maulvi Faisal Khurasani, and others of the Khurasani group. The terrorist attacks, as you can see, in Pakistan continue to be very, very high, 632. And finally, this is the last slide that I'll show you guys, is the area of the terrorist attacks, which were all in 2009 concentrated in Zone 1, essentially spreads all over the country. And now you've got a situation, this is 2012, because those are the years I collected data for, it's even worse now, okay? Karachi is now controlled, 1/3 of Karachi, so 1/3 of 19 million people live under Taliban control. The outskirts of Karachi have been declared no-go areas by the Karachi, by the police. Karachi has actually lost 3 police chiefs just in the past year who have been assassinated, or there have been assassination attempts on them by the Taliban. And you see essentially that this whole idea of drones, which was supposed to excise terrorism from Pakistan, the rhetoric was that this is a surgical precision, we're killing exactly the right people. What it's done is cause A, massive displacement in the country. B, it's not gotten, not reduced the capacity of any of these terror groups, because as you can see, first they were right there, now they're everywhere, and they're able to carry out attacks everywhere, and really, really attacks with massive civilian casualties. Over 100 people have died in bombings just last week in Pakistan, just last week. So, you have to really look at this data to see that, and of course, what are we doing again now in Iraq? We're doing airstrikes to do the similar kind of thing, where we think that, we're just going to bomb them, and we're going to get rid of them, and then everything else will be okay. The fact is, everything else is not okay. Pakistan, in the past 5 years, has gone from a country that had a conflict going on in one region to a country that is now completely everywhere. And you see very little, if any, decimation of the capacity of Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or any of their affiliated groups to carry out these attacks. So I'm going to stop. This presentation is longer, but I want everyone else to talk. And then, of course, I'll take your questions.
Thank you, Rafia. Next, we have James Ricks, a social justice activist, traveled to Pakistan with Code Pink in an anti-drone march in 2012. He is also involved in ongoing protests of the Hancock Air Force Base, home of the 174th Attack Wing. This is in upstate New York. He is the grandfather of 2 magical grandchildren.
How's everybody this afternoon, evening? I honestly feel like they brought me here to make those two look good, but yeah, actually my involvement, I'm going to get to Pakistan in a second, but my involvement in social justice here in Ithaca came about yesterday. There was a memorial for Sean Greenwood. He was killed by some questionable police action down in Ithaca, and it happened to be when my grandson Hassan was born. Pretty much understandably, the policeman that did it was vindicated of any wrongdoing, and there was no need for any further investigation. And I looked at my grandson and said, I don't want him to come up into town like this. I was at a Sean Greenwood Truth and Reconciliation meeting, and Mary Ann's sister, she has a very active family. Claire Grady was there, and she told me that there was a meeting with a Catholic worker, and they were dealing with Martin Luther King at the time. They didn't go from here, but they were preparing for a march to Hancock Air Base to protest the drones. That began my drone involvement. I went to a meeting at a friend Todd Sadler's house, and I saw a picture of an older man. He was holding a young girl, and you could see she was 8 or 9 maybe, and from her waist down, you couldn't even tell that it was a human being. It struck something in me. I knew that, you know, there's the cost of war and all of that, but this was a little girl. And I've heard about so many people that were killed, and as Rafia has said, that once people are killed, then they're post-mortem categorized as combatants, or suspected combatants. And I saw this picture. I got involved in the legalities of invading a sovereign country, violating international law, and there was a lot of activity at the time in Pakistan. There was an election. There was an election going on. A brother named Imran Khan was running for the president of Pakistan, and he had a section of his program, an anti-drone platform, and we were definitely, you know, we were with them on that part of it. And we came from America into an election in Pakistan, not knowing all the different intricacies, but we knew that he had an anti-drone platform, and that was what inspired a group here to send a delegation along with a code pink, because 3 or 4 people from the upstate drone coalition had gone also. Judy Bello, Bonnie Mahoney, Danny Burns, and myself, all from central New York. We traveled to Pakistan at a pretty troublesome time. There was a film that had come out in September. We went in October of 2012, and there was a film, The Innocence of Muslims, that had come out portraying the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a buffoon, and there was, I mean, clashes all over, worldwide, and in particular in Pakistan. We were on some conference calls with Imran Khan, a lady named Medea Benjamin, Ann Wright. They were discussing when we should come, because there was a lot of anti-American sentiment because of that meeting. When we went to Pakistan, the group that I traveled with was concerned with what we termed as citizen diplomacy, to try to convey to the people in Pakistan that everybody, this is a diverse country, and There are people that seriously object to the policies that this country is involved in, and that we feel as though that they were illegal. We did do protests to speak out against it, and at times we were jailed for it, and fined and whatever they do when you speak against power. So we went to inform the people that this is not America. It's just not this monolithic country. I saw a little clip up there where they had the teacher was telling the kids to hurry up so they can go build your drones, and that it wasn't actually like that. It was very interesting in the sense that Code Pink had a different approach. They involved themselves in sort of mass publicity. If we went to a demonstration and the press wasn't there, the demonstration was cut off and we went to where the press was. I found that a bit troubling. It seemed like a dog and pony show to me. And I did object while we were there. And it just showed me at times that maybe if you just sit back and be quiet and observe what's going on, it may bear more fruit. I thought it seemed almost like publicity seeking to me. Whenever there was a big event, we would definitely be there. We did publicized fast in the center of Islamabad. What I saw from the efforts that they put forth in coordinating all of that, there was such an anti-drone sentiment worldwide. When we came back from Pakistan, I had to, like eat crow. I felt like that, sometimes if you're trying to get to the same place, if people take a different road, you have to be a little patient to try to see where it's going before you tend to criticize. I was so proud of the effect that they had, even though at the time when they were calling all of these newspapers and everybody, it felt like, putting yourself on television. And I mean, people that I was with, I would come back to the hotel and go into the snack room and see them actually on TV. What was really troubling is meeting some of the drone victims. Some that had been harmed, that were injured, and some that were family members of people that had been eliminated by a drone strike. We were in the the Lawyers Guild. We were in the Lawyers Guild in Islamabad with a brother named Shahzad Akbar, and he had a brother named Kareem Khan. Kareem Khan was a lawyer. He had gone to school in Texas, and he liked Americans, which was unbelievably forgiving for to think that he had been in Texas and he still liked Americans. It was mind-boggling. But he showed, he had a computer, a laptop, with the pictures of his dead son and his brother. One was a student and one was a government worker. One of the people in our delegation, I believe her name was Leah Bolger, was the president or the former president of Vets for Peace, Vietnam Vets for Peace. And she mentioned that, that I have been in the Veterans for Peace, and you could see this brother bristle. I said, after he had spoken about the drones and his family being obliterated, 5 Hellfire missiles had hit his house. They were pictures of his house beforehand and 5 piles of dust. It looked like sand, mounds of sand afterwards with the a picture of his dead relatives next to him. But she said that she was in the Navy and that she had financial pressures, and that they were going to give her money for joining the Navy, and she did. She saw it as a way out of her situation. And this brother, the tension in the room, you could cut it with a knife. And I wondered, why would she mention that? And then she went on and she said that she had protested in different places and she had been arrested. And I saw the brother, he warmed a bit. You know, he asked her, had she been arrested, and she told him that she had, and that she had been put in prison, protesting. What she later realized was some problematic geopolitical type of approach that the United States government seems to have on the whole rest of the world, and that she felt as though she made a mistake. And it showed that, you know, by her coming out of her comfort zone at that particular time, being honest with this brother Kareem Khan, there was a joining, there was a relief that we all felt as a group. It was unbelievably humbling to speak to the people on the march. We went from a march from Islamabad to Waziristan with Imran Khan as part of his campaign. But as we traveled from up to the northern regions, the people that were on the street just seemed so invested in just coming to greet us. I saw old men with gnarled hands and fingers, and they were trying to give the peace sign. And kids would come up and ask us, were we gonna be in Waziristan with them the next day? And they wanted to stand with us. They wanted us to be with them. They were so gracious. And I'm trying to remember some of the amazing things that had happened to us while we were there. We were invited to different restaurants by people just because we were there to speak out against the policies that this government has exacted. A really interesting thing, we were in a camp before we were supposed to head to Waziristan the next day. We were stopped from going there, but in this camp there was a black market operative, I guess you would call him, and we found that you could buy chips. They're little chips that they place wherever the drone is supposed to attack. That there was a black market. There was a black market for chips. And as Rafia, I'm sorry, I just met her. But as there was a black market, that if the intelligence they gathered was from people on the ground, Pakistanis on the ground. And if they got paid as they distributed these chips as suspected or Taliban members, okay? So there's a financial incentive. They take these chips and they place them where the suspected enemies are, but if you had $1,000 American money, you could buy a chip. And if you had an enemy, a problem that you wanted to eliminate, and you had the money to buy it. And I'm not saying every person did it, but I ran into people in this camp that said that these chips are available. Okay, they were conducting that kind of business, and they call us, whenever they kill people, they call it actionable intelligence. It's mind-boggling, and the double standards that abounded. It was mind-boggling to see pictures. We were in a hotel in Islamabad. There was a photographer that came in with over 100 pictures of collateral damage children 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. When we spoke to the ambassador, he came to speak with us also. When we were asking him about this, he spoke to us in a manner that it was something that he was totally unaware of, that as far as he was concerned, there was no innocent people killed, and if they had been, that you could count the number of innocents killed on one hand. And I had just seen a picture of more than 100 dead children, and I believe that all of them were young boys, because the photographer said that the people in those villages would not allow them to take pictures of the dead women. Okay? In my talk tonight, I was supposed to also cover the efficacy of the drone policy, and if anything, there are people there that had a really not antagonistic attitude toward the United States. And these attitudes are changing. This is a policy that has created a lot of animosity against the United States. It hasn't eliminated terror at all. It has done so much to create terrorism. There are so many pieces of this puzzle. There's racism that's involved in it. There's not the people that are being killed by these drones, and nobody should be. You know, it's a violation of international law, the United Nations Charter, and the Geneva Conventions, and all of that. But it seems like in this country, might makes right. And if you have no one that can bring you to justice, then injustice is going to pretty much reign.